Welcome back. It's been a while. Today we're going to be back with another helpful hint number 13. I believe that's the number. We're going to target a specific type of intervention. So you've conducted an assessment and maybe they didn't get it. So we want them to go back, students to go back over their work. And the best thing to do when they're reviewing their work is to conduct an error analysis. So we're going to use an error analysis as a means of intervention. And the tool we're going to use is a type of graphic organizer called a Frayer model. I love a Frayer model. That was my bread and butter back in the day when I first started teaching. Now, the great thing about a Frayer model, this is one example of it at the very bottom here. Let me move myself out the way. A Frayer model is just kind of like a four square. I cannot move my face out the way. It's like a four square. And the great thing about a Frayer model is it actually satisfies some of the high yield strategies that Marzano has identified that are the best tools to use in the classroom. So, or the best strategies to implement in the classroom. One of those strategies is identifying similarities and differences or comparing and contrasting. You want to make sure that students are summarizing and taking notes. You want to use non-linguistic representation, which are anything that's not textual. So visuals, auditory things, anything that uses kind of your senses. And last but not least, you want to use cues, questions, advanced organizers. Now, Frayer Model is a type of advanced organizer. Okay. In addition um, to satisfying four of the 9 high-yield strategies identified by Marzano, it also satisfies some of the high-yield strategies that John Hattie identified years ago. Hattie did a study of, well, he actually compiled a whole bunch of research that was targeting different strategies used in education, and he tiered them, ranked them based on the effectiveness they have. And anything that was generated a 0.41 rating or higher was considered highly effective. So Frayer models they actually help you to integrate prior knowledge. Is a means of scaffolding instruction. It requires students to summarize, just like in Marzano's 9 strategies. It is a good form of intervention for students who have learning needs. And it is a tool that's used for vocabulary acquisition. So to actually help students to embrace vocabulary and internalize it. It's an explicit means of teaching, and it uses imagery. So it hits so many points in this little small activity. Okay. So what I would suggest, I don't like people reinventing the wheel. I will take the assessment that you guys hold on one second. So another thing, when I said students with learning needs, well, that is like Frayer models are really good for students who struggle with vocabulary acquisition. So those students who are special education, who receive special education services or receive English language services, they struggle with that vocabulary, and this is a good tool to help them to actually embrace vocabulary, to learn it and embrace it, internalize it, because it links prior knowledge. But anyway, back to the task at hand. How do I implement this? So, if I were you, I would just take a question that they actually had on their assessment and have them analyze that question. So here I have a question. It's something that has a graphical thing. I love this in science, so we have a lot of graphical representation in the questions. And I will have them read the question, something they got wrong, identify a vocabulary term in it. Doesn't matter which vocabulary term, as long as it's a vocabulary term. And then I will have them specify that vocabulary term. So we're going to have them, I'm going to simulate this. So in this case, I'm going to take G2 stage. That is a vocabulary word in science. So I will take the vocabulary word and I will put it in the center of my Frayer model. So how the students do that. Then I will have the students define that vocabulary term. And here's the great thing about this. They can steal it from the book. I do not care. I do not care. Especially for those students who receive special education services and those who receive ELL services, because they may not be as privy, as adept at putting in their own words as of yet. Don't worry, the rest of this is going to require them to put things in their own words. So if they steal this or plagiarize this, I'm good to go with it. They want to plagiarize anyway, so might as well let them do it there. So they'll take a definition that is the tried and true definition format. They can get it from a dictionary or from the book. But now you have a little bit of options in the top right hand corner. Sometimes people put characteristics, sometimes they put, there's different things that you can add here. You can have this specialized, but I'm just going to say characteristics. What do you know about this particular this stage? So this is what they have to come up with on their own, essentially. Okay, so now they're putting their own words here. The bottom two boxes are key. This is where you hit those Marzano's strategies, because it requires them to come up with an example on the left side and a non-example on the right side. But not only does it require them to come up with an example, they actually have to come up with a visual representation of that example and a visual representation of the opposite of that example. Okay, so for example, in this case, G2 stage, it basically is the point in the cell division where the cell gets bigger, it grows in size. So instead of me taking a picture of this cell cycle, I don't want anything dealing related like that. I want something that represents the key idea of what this vocabulary word means. So I found a picture that represents growth. This little boy is growing, he's getting bigger. Okay, and then I have to write a little blurb that explains, that defends why I chose that word. So the cell gets bigger during this stage. So that's why I chose this picture. Now people struggle with the next one, but the next one is key. That non-example. So if the stage gets bigger, or this is a stage where the cell gets bigger, I need something that doesn't represent that. In fact, I wanted to emphasize something different. Synthesis is the stage that happens before G2 for you non-science people. And what happens in synthesis is that's where DNA replication occurs. So I want my non-example to be DNA replication, because now I know we're not doing that here. It's not in G2, that's in a different stage. So I put a picture of DNA replication here, and I wrote as my blurb synthesis stage. That happens in the synthesis stage. My Frayer model is done. Okay, so how can you implement this in class? What does this look like when you're actually giving it to the students? Because they miss more than one problem, right? So you have, I have two ways that I think you can do this. To introduce the concept of error analysis using this Frayer model, I would first do it individually. So you'll have you have all these problems, get the assessment, have students identify a problem that they missed. You can either start with what you as a teacher can demonstrate it first, and you can find the question that everybody missed, okay? And then you can demonstrate that what I just did, just the steps of that. Create your exemplar by having it filled in already. And then, but then you can have it where they choose a question that they missed. And the student would choose one vocabulary word from that. And it has to be a key vocabulary word that's dealing with that concept, okay? They'll create the Frayer model. And then here is the key. You have to embed in your instruction time for the students to actually share their information with others. Because if I missed a question and I chose this vocabulary word, well, maybe someone else missed the question also, but they chose cell cycle. And so we're going to share with each other our Frayer models. And the most important thing is we're going to defend. You make your student have to defend why they chose their example. And they have to defend why they chose their non-example, because that's where the actual internalizing of the word comes from, that comparing and contrasting, okay? So if I compare and contrast mine, I share with you why I chose these words, what I chose, and mine deals with growth. Well, maybe you chose something else that the word is linked to. And now I have two visuals in my head, okay? And then at the end, assess the students on something, on a different problem, but it's similar to this. It has the same concept, but it's a different problem. Now, once you get very savvy with that, the students start doing this more often, you can actually break them into groups. So, break them into groups. And then you can have it where you have 4 to 5. I never really do 5 people in a group, but this is an example of when 5 students in a group would be all right. Because if I had 5 questions, each student would choose a different question that was missed. So you can choose one. If you miss one, you choose one. You miss 2, whatever. But it has to be different. It can't be the same question. And each student is going to choose a question. They're going to choose a vocabulary word from that question. They're going to create a Frayer model. They will explain and defend their Frayer model to each other in their group first. And remember, embed time for them to talk and discuss. So they'll explain it to their groups first, and then they'll share it out with the class, and they have to explain their stuff. They have to defend. And at the end, once again, assess the students with a similar problem. That's it in a nutshell. It's a great, you'll be surprised how wonderful a Frayer model will is in your instruction. And you don't have to use it as an error analysis. You can just use it, you can use it prior as a tool for triggering prior knowledge. You can use it for a tool during the instruction, or in this case, like I said, we're using it as an intervention afterwards, after they take an assessment. Frayer models are great. If I had to get some stock in it, I will actually get stock in it because I love it so much. Okay, I hope that helps. Okay, stick around for another helpful hint.